Welcome to a real cult classic where we talk about, well, your favorite cult classics, a little bit of pop culture, a smattering of old Hollywood gossip, with a side of scandal and intrigue. I'm your esteemed cult leader, Megs from the Cult of Megs, and this is my friend, your friend, cult elder Auntie Amy. Amy, say hi to the cult.
Hello.
Amy, we're back for season two, fittingly in October. So, viewer beware, you're in for a scare. It's our favorite
Ooh.
month.
It's our favorite month. Are you as mad as I am about not being born in this month? I mean, I was born in September, which is close, but
That
I
is close.
still get angry about not being an October baby.
I mean, I would have loved to have been born in October so I could officially be a spooky bee.
Yeah, it's okay. We can pretend. We can appreciate October and pretend like we were
My
born in this
spirit
month.
was born in October.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we can have two birthdays like hobbits have second breakfasts. We can have our second birthday in October. Also, I was reminded of the a birthday gift you gave me a few years ago, the haunted trolley tour.
Mm-hmm.
Does that still
No.
go? It's done?
Yeah. The bus, what is it? West Coast Sightseeing bought out, I believe they bought out the trolley people. And then when the old pandemic hit, they stopped doing it. And I think that they hadn't done it for a little while, and then they brought it back in 2019, and then the pandemic hit. So it just hasn't happened. So I feel like there's a market for me to buy a hearse and start doing haunted tours of Vancouver.
Oh my goodness. That, oh my, that's your calling. I feel like out of
I
everything.
tried. I tried after university. There was a hearse for sale at the Repo Depot in White Rock, and I asked my dad for business loan, and he was like, "No, that's a bad idea." But joke's on him because his business went under because he died, and I'm still alive, so my business would still be going.
Megan. Wait,
I could have saved us transport fees from the
oh
hospice.
no, Megan.
It was yellow too, the hearse.
How much was it?
It was only 4 grand,
Whoa, that
right?
feels like
Because there used,
um
I don't know if they still do it, but there was a tour in LA where you went in a hearse and you did like a haunted murder tour. And that's where I got my inspiration from.
I think that's brilliant. I think that's brilliant. And there's obviously like you said, there's an opening in the
Hmm.
market for this type of thing. Well, let's put it to the cultlings. Would you go on a spooky tour of Vancouver with Megan in a hearse?
Let me drive you around in a hearse. I promise I'll put seatbelts in it.
Okay, well, listen, I'll invest. But there's also the Stanley Park spooky train something. What is that? That's still happening. I just saw an ad
I
for it.
think so. That's more of like a kids thing. The
Oh,
spooky train. Yeah.
boo. I mean, good for kids, but we can't forget the
Burnaby
adults.
Village also does like a haunted thing, but I don't think it's super spooky, but it's like a historical village. And they do Halloween stuff and Christmas stuff.
Nice. Nice. So, what have we been up to on this break? I will say, instead of a haunted trolley tour, Megan for my birthday took me to Crumble Cookie in Port Coquitlam, and we had a
Mhm.
spooky experience on the drive there.
We did where my the cover in the back of my SUV came loose and it sounded like somebody was knocking on the outside of the car while we were on the highway. And I missed the exit and we ended up in Surrey and I had to do a U-turn to get back onto the bridge. And
I'm
then we
I'm still
went
not
down
convinced that
and
it
then we
was.
went down that creepy exit under the golden ears that I didn't know existed and the my South African because that's the voice I picked for my um iPhone, my South African navigator, he didn't tell me that there was a roundabout, and we took the wrong way on the roundabout and ended up in a desolate parking lot with one lone semi truck with its.
Yeah, no, the semi truck turned its lights on when we got into that open parking lot. It
Hmm.
was very spooky.
It had some Stephen King undertones. And then we had to drive under the bridge once we got back. That was also really creepy. And yet, getting home was much more direct. I'm not, maybe it would have been more direct if I hadn't missed that turn, but I think we still would have had to go under the Golden Ears, which was really creepy. So just like never go to Port Coquitlam. No offense to people who live in Port Coquitlam. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and also, well, we can't forget the moon that was
Oh, it
out
was yeah.
and about. Let me tell
Hmm.
you, it was. I think it. Yeah, the whole thing was very spooky. And then, you get to Crumble Cookie, and the line is also spooky. It's just too many people. It's
That's why
just
you have to be a planner
yes.
like Megan and order your cookies ahead of time.
Yeah, Megan went inside because there's a separate kiosk for online pickup orders, and people
They're livid.
were livid.
But
And
that's what you get for not
yeah,
being a planner. That's on you.
I
Your
know,
lack
it's
of
true.
forethought is not my problem,
And also, if that's an option, why wouldn't you? Why would you want to
right?
wait in line and also risk not being able to get the
That's not the
cookies?
type of thrill I'm here for, is
No.
waiting in a long lineup.
I will say, um, I was expecting to not like the crumble cookies haul that we got. I
People are
thought,
really rude about them.
yeah, they were pretty great. Like, I don't know. I mean, I know every week there are new flavors and different type like cookies and cakes but we got a good one.
We got a good week.
Yeah.
I looked it up and I said, Amy, if you want these cookies, this is the week.
Yeah.
They were
And
all winners.
your wonderful hubby
Hmm.
reaped the benefits of that trip as well.
He did. He thoroughly enjoyed.
Yes, we were
He
on the
did.
same page about the
He really
Biscoff
liked the
one.
Biscoff one. It
Me
was
too.
too uh pumpkiny spicy for me.
That is why I liked it. I thought it
Hmm.
was gonna be, what is Biscoff? Is it caramel?
No, it's a as and half Italian.
I know,
I'm
I don't,
disappointed that you don't know what Biscoff is. It's a cookie.
but what is the actual like buttery substance? It's like, is it just crushed cookie
Well, they
into
make
like butter?
Biscoff like spread too.
But that's what I'm talking about, the spread. I know the cookie, but
Because
like
I'm
the
pretty
what is
sure
the
they
spread?
like soaked the cookie in something like a tiramisu. It's
Hmm.
speculous.
It's true. I don't eat Biscoff anything. I don't think I've ever tried a Biscoff. I think they give
It's
them
like
out on
caramel
planes.
flavored. Oh, I shouldn't have. Oh, it's made with Belgian. I thought it was Italian. Apparently, it's Belgian. Sorry, Amy.
Oh, don't you have egg on your face?
I do.
I was like, we never had that growing up. My nana never had that stuff.
I thought it was an Italian thing, but it's not. It's from a place I can't even pronounce.
But is it caramel?
Apparently, yeah, apparently it's like a type of caramel.
See, I told you I don't
It's
like
made with
caramel.
like Belgian brown sugar.
That like brown sugar stuff based things are nice. I like anything pumpkin, I'm a nut for. I'm so basic that way. Um, October 1st, I go on my pumpkin tour and I get everything pumpkin. Um,
I brought you pumpkin cookies last year, didn't I?
yes,
Yeah, I'll have
you're
to make those again. Those
yes,
ones are
they
good.
were excellent. Um, so that was really fun.
You know what's not fun?
What?
Working on a movie set that's super haunted,
That is definitely not fun.
which is the topic of our inaugural podcast. We do have spooky podcasts planned every week
That's right.
for this month. And so we're kicking it off with spooky things that happen on horror movies. And I
Yep.
do believe that you are going to go first, ironically, with a movie that you are absolutely terrified of.
Oh, you betcha. So I tried to get out of this, to squirrel my way out of this because um I didn't want to cover The Exorcist, which to me was the first film that came to mind when we talked about spooky happenings on movie sets. But I am so terrified of little 13-year-old Reagan as a possessed creature that I can't even like research it because I'm so scared one of the images of her is gonna pop out. Like I had to do so much of like holding my hand in front of my computer screen to shield myself from her image. Um so but I couldn't not do it. You can't do this
It's
topic and not
iconic.
cover The
Yeah.
Exorcist. Like come on. So I braved the research for you cultlings and you, Megan, because I know The Exorcist is also a book recommendation
Hmm.
on your list. But I will say I did not rewatch it. I watched it once, and that is all I will ever do. I will never watch it again. So we talked about this, Megan, that for the film to still have this effect on me and a lot of people, it's not just me, a lot of people have this reaction to The Exorcist. 51 years later, it was made in 1973 or released in 1973. So it had its 50th year anniversary last year. I mean, that's crazy.
It's those practical effects. They are
I
far more
know.
effective, but I also think that a lot of people grew up like, especially with Catholicism, has such a strong belief in that type of stuff that if you grow
Yeah.
up around it, that it's you can't separate it because there's that belief system there, right? Like they are the trained exorcists.
Yeah, and it's really baked in. But I think
Mhm.
also another reason it's so terrifying, which is something that the director William Friedkin himself brought up, is that, this is not like a Dracula story or a story that's set in some fantastical land. It's set in Washington, D.C., on a residential street. It concerns a regular family in a regular house, and upstairs in the bedroom is a young girl that could be anyone you know, or you, or me, that is possessed by a demon. And it's that familiarity that creates
Mhm.
terror, as well as the religious aspect that you're talking about. And I should say that it is the only film my father has ever admitted to being scared of,
And he's
which
not scared of much, I
and
do not
he's
believe.
yeah, he's
He's a
not scared.
very brave man,
Yeah, he's not scared of anything. He
also
said
very tall, which I
he's
feel like adds to his braveness.
he is pretty tall. Um,
And French Canadian, and they're not afraid of anything.
no, they're not. And he fully admitted that because he grew up like he saw the film when it was released in theaters, which is also something that
Oh, that
I
would have
think I
been
was talking
terrifying.
to
Yeah.
you about. Like, I wish I was alive when some of these iconic films were released because the craze around The Exorcist was also intense. Like, the trailers alone were scaring people, and it was banned. I think like the VHS release, like that didn't happen. It was banned in some kind, like it like the whole thing
I
is
always think about like experiencing these effects for the first time when they're new. Like
yeah,
what was it when the first motion picture came out and a train was coming towards the audience and everyone freaked out because they thought it was going to come out of the screen. I feel like it would be like that, like
absolutely.
witnessing the first motion picture.
Absolutely. The Exorcist, it was a book before
Hmm.
it was a movie. And because the book is on your list, I thought I would start by giving a background on how that book and subsequently the film came to be,
Hmm.
because that story is spooky as hell. So, The Exorcist was inspired by an event in 1949 in Maryland where the writer William Peter Blatty was studying at Georgetown University. Now, he heard some details about an exorcism that was happening nearby. The story, which was actually reported on by the Washington Post, so there was definitely legitimacy to it, was about a 14-year-old boy who was later revealed to be Ronald Edwin Hunkler. He experimented with a Ouija board and then got sick. Those Ouija boards, I won't
No,
touch
you do
one.
not. Nope.
No. Now, Ronald's personality changed after he got sick, after he played with the Ouija board. His body developed unexplained welts, and there was some poltergeist activity in his home. There were also apparently words and visual depictions written slash drawn on his body, words like spite and hell. And these are also things that were depicted in the film, and I'm sure were in the book. I've never read the book. Now, the boy Ronald was from a Lutheran family, so the parents went to their minister who told them, let the boy stay in my house overnight. And he did. And during that stay, unexplained things occurred in the minister's home. So, for example, the bed the boy was sleeping in suddenly moved across the floor until the boy's head bumped against the wall, awakening him. If he sat in a chair, it would move erratically, stuff like that. So the minister told the parents the next morning, look, Catholics claim to be able to deal with this sort of thing, and so you should go to a Jesuit priest. So the parents found a priest named William Bodern. Now, he would conduct more than 20 exorcism rituals on Ronald in the span of 3 months. Then Ronald was relocated to St. Louis. Is it St. Louis or St. Louis?
I think if you're from the area, it's St. Louis, but I always feel like it's silly when you don't have a local dialect to call it like New Orleans. Like just
Okay, so it might be so St. Louis, but we're going to say St. Louis because, as Megan pointed out, we're not from there and we don't want another Cacio de Pepe situation here. So then Ronald was relocated to St. Louis to be treated for demonic possession. So, according to Bodern, the force within Ronald was apparently keen to go to St. Louis. And this is him quoted as saying, on one evening, the word Lewis was written on the boy's ribs in deep red scratches. Next, when there was some question of the time of departure, the word Saturday was written plainly on the boy's hip. As to the length of time the mother and the boy should stay in St. Louis, another message was printed on the boy's chest that read 3.5 weeks. The printing always appeared without any motion on the part of the boy's hands. So Ronald was admitted to the Alexian Brothers Hospital in St. Louis on the 21st of March in 1949. Nearly a month later, Ronald broke into a violent tantrum of screaming, cursing, and voicing of Latin phrases as Jesuit priests allegedly cast the demon out of his body. So it was dealt with, apparently. I was trying to figure out, like, okay, so what happened to him after that? So, what I discovered is that Ronald died by stroke a month before his 86th birthday. He was a NASA engineer, and according to one of his companions, he was always on edge about his work colleagues finding out that he was the inspiration behind the film. His companion said that his worry about this was so bad and kind of marked his entire life that he would even leave his house every Halloween, thinking that someone might discover him, come to his residence, and not let him have any peace, which is really, really sad. And shortly before his death, apparently a Catholic priest showed up at his house unexpectedly to perform last rites. His companion said, I have no idea how the father knew to come, but he got Ron to heaven. Ron's in heaven, and he's with God now.
it would
So,
be very hard if you were like a man of science and then you had this. Yeah, I could see why that would be a struggle for him.
yeah. Yeah, and just to have your like I don't know what went on. Like I don't, it's like all of this. Like I'm going to get into the events of what can be deemed supernatural interferences on set. But again, like some people on the movie set are believers or religious and some aren't. And so people have varying opinions on the legitimacy of all this stuff.
Hmm.
So even with this story, like I don't know, but some of these things, and these are like written down in the priest's journal. I mean, priests, throughout history have been, very I'm not
But
gonna say
they
anything,
all
but
tell the truth. What do you mean?
yeah, exactly. So I don't know, but I just find this like crazy. So anyway, so Blatty recalled this story years later, and was determined to write about it. But he was actually nervous because he comes from a comedy background, and this would actually be his first foray into serious material. Now, Father Tom Birmingham, who was in the movie, and served as the technical advisor on set, actually taught Blotty in high school. And so Blotty went to ask him about guidance in pursuing the story. Father Tom agreed under the condition that he take it seriously because he didn't want another Rosemary's Baby. He wanted something that would confront the awesome power of evil in God's world. So they worked together and the book was written and the screenplay. Um, I'll get into a few fun facts about the film, but I want to talk about the events that occurred on set because that's why we're really here. So, first up, As cast and crew began to prep for production, a fire broke out on set of the McNeil home, and it's claimed that the only room that survived the disaster was Reagan's bedroom.
Yeah.
And if you want to know more about this, it's told in the documentary Fear of God, 25 Years of the Exorcist. Again, I did rewatch some of that for you, but they just pop these clips randomly and I just couldn't take it anymore. I had to turn it off. So in addition to that, it took 6 weeks to rebuild the set, and it should be noted that no one was on set when the fire happened, and they couldn't find an electrical problem or any substantial reason for why this fire started in the first place. And I do think it is incredibly strange that her bedroom remained intact because, as we know, that is sort of the primary location for all of the demonic shit. Now, the first week of filming, Max von Sydow, who portrayed Father Lancaster Marin, learned that his brother had died and he needed to return to Sweden for the funeral. Similarly, Linda Blair lost her grandfather, causing yet another delay. So there were all these things that were causing the delay of filming, which is also creepy. Then a 10-foot demon statue set to be used in the film was lost in Hong Kong while en route to a filming location in Iraq. Ellen Burstyn, who plays the lead, said in the doc that I referenced that 9 people died during the production, including an assistant cameraman's newborn baby and a night watchman. Another of the deceased was actor Jack McGowan, who died shortly after appearing in the movie as film director Burke Dennings, one of the characters killed by demon-possessed Reagan. Only 54 years old, McGowan died of complications from the flu at the Algonquin Hotel in New York City. Now, others on the set suffered lifelong injuries. A crew member lost his toe, while a carpenter chopped off his thumb. And this is I knew about this particular incident that I'm going to tell you like years and years ago, and it always freaked me out. So Linda Blair fractured her lower back while convulsing in a harness, leading to a lifelong struggle with scoliosis. Now, in an interview, Blair said that she remembered screaming while they were filming, "Please make it stop. It hurts. It burns." But because her pleas mirrored the script, no one knew to stop the scene. And that's the footage they used in the movie, by the way. So when she's on the bed convulsing and screaming, she's not acting. That is really her screaming in pain and terror.
Oh, the
Horrible.
70s.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Burston also hurt her back while filming. Again, this was a human error. This wasn't necessarily supernatural, but a crew member pulled too hard on her harness when she was falling backwards in a scene where Reagan pushes her and she hurt her back.
Mm.
Now, of course, like I was saying, with speculations like these, you're going to have varying opinions on the validity of the claims. Were these just coincidences? Well, enough did think the set was haunted, so the director invited Father Thomas Birmingham, who I referenced earlier, to perform an exorcism on the set. But Birmingham didn't want to increase anxiety and he thought it was just a series of accidents, which is really funny. So instead of an exorcism, he simply blessed everyone. Now, Blair was another one of the non-believers of the supernatural intervention. She said even at 13, it wasn't scary to her because she was raised Protestant and didn't understand the concept of possession. And she said like a demon to her was like the equivalent of Sasquatch or like Dracula. Like it was just sort of like a made up thing. So she was, I guess, well suited to play the part. But she did admit that it was a good thing they didn't hire a Catholic child. I don't know. I don't know how that would have gone. But here's something that's crazy, and I don't know if you know about this, but a presumed serial killer by the name of Paul Bateson was cast in the film as a radiographer. Okay, so hear me out. I'm going to take you through it. So the director, William Friedkin, in doing research for a specific sequence of his film, was given a front row seat to a cerebral angiography at New York University's hospital. So the procedure, which was, I guess now it's been largely abandoned due to technological advances because of the procedure's like brutality. Like it's essentially where a catheter is inserted into a patient's artery to obtain X-ray images of blood vessels in and near the brain. So while viewing the procedure, Friedkin was so impressed with the medical staff, including Paul Bateson, that he offered them the opportunity to play themselves in a scene in which Reagan undergoes an angiography. It's a small part within a short amount of screen time, but Bateson has a few lines of dialogue and features prominently in it. But that scene, I will say, and given that what we know now is even more terrifying, given the amount of blood and medical accuracy, was actually considered the film's most disturbing moment. Um, it was sort of seen as like medical science and the brutality of it subbed in for the demon in a way that was much more scary. So, 4 years after The Exorcist was released, Paul Bateson was living in New York, struggling with alcoholism, which led him to lose his job at University Hospital. So he would frequent the Manhattan club scene, and there he befriended variety journalist Addison Verrill, who was found dead in his apartment on September 14th, 1977. The Village Voice's Arthur Bell reported on the crime, stating that every year there are approximately 4 sexually oriented murders of gay men in the Greenwich Village area. He said seldom do the papers report the crimes. Then, 8 days after Verrill's body was found, things took a turn when Bell received an anonymous phone call from someone confessing to Verrill's murder. The caller admitted to intimate details about that night and Verrill's apartment and his life, prompting Bell to report it to the police. Later that same night, another phone call came in from someone giving him Paul Bateson's name as the killer. Now, Bateson was arrested. He denied it, killing Verrill. But during his trial, prosecutors sought to prove that he didn't just kill Verrill. The remains of 6 men were discovered in the Hudson River between 1975 and 1977, remaining unsolved by apathetic law enforcement, hence Bell's initial article pointing that out. Now, apparently, Bateson had admitted to a friend about murdering other men, and according to the prosecution, examiners had said that the person who cut up those bodies was a person who was either a butcher or a person with medical knowledge because of the way the cuts were done. Because of insufficient evidence, the judge dismissed the notion of Bateson's involvement with the other murders and sentenced him to 20 years minimum for Verrill. But during his imprisonment, again, there was a lot of like him telling people he killed the other, like, yeah, I feel like probably he did some other stuff. Now, Bateson was released after 24 years on August 25th, 2003, and to this day, where he is unknown. So the New York Department of Corrections has no record of his death, although it's been confirmed his last known residence was in Freeport, New York. So this guy did did get out of prison and he just sort of lived his life. We don't know where, we don't know what he's up to. So this guy, if you watch The Exorcist, you can see this guy in that scene, that famous scene with Reagan, and he's like also the one closest to Reagan and like consoling her and making sure she's going to be okay. Like it's really freaky. So on top of supernatural stuff, there's a serial killer in The Exorcist. So there you go. Those are the freaky things.
When you said that they thought that the serial killer might have been a butcher, it took everything in me not to go a baker or a candlestick maker.
Don't ever censor yourself. Just jump in
I,
right in
I
with
was
that
like,
stuff.
this is too serious, Megan. It's spooky. Don't ruin it.
Oh,
Control yourself for once.
you can always interrupt me with gems like that. I mean, it
Trying to
is
be spooky here, Amy.
I know, but
We
it's
like a
nice
little
to
levity, but
undercut. Yeah, like we need some levity.
well, speaking of levity, I
Oh,
covered Poltergeist.
They're here.
I can't wait.
Yep.
Carol Ann.
Mm, So Steven Spielberg had wanted to write a ghost story, well, a sci-fi kind of ghost story that would be the sequel to Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And his sequel was called Night Skies. As Steven had been unable to direct due to his contract with Universal because he was in the middle of doing E.T., he had asked Texas Chainsaw Massacre director Tobe Hooper to come on board. Toby turned him down. He wasn't really into the sci-fi stuff. And Steven hadn't really wanted to do Night Skies at all. He didn't want to do a sequel to Close Encounters. So he very willingly scrapped it. And they used the horror parts from his movie and combined them with an idea that Toby had pitched to him after he turned down Night Skies, which is bold to turn down a project and be like, actually, let's do this instead. But anyway, it worked in his favor because that idea would become Poltergeist. Now, Poltergeist premiered on June 4th, 1982, a week before E.T. It was a commercial hit and the highest grossing horror film for the year. It earned 3 Oscar nominations and won a BAFTA for Best Visual Effects. Its legacy would live on through multiple sequels, remakes, and the horrifying tragedies that befell multiple members of the original and the sequels. The origin of the Poltergeist curse is allegedly linked to the scene where Diane Freeling, played by JoBeth Williams, falls into the unfinished swimming pool. Skeletons from the cemetery that the house was built upon rise up from the murk around her. Do you remember this scene, Amy?
I remember that scene, and I also remember reading that those skeletons were real skeletons.
Yes. But what Joe Beth and the rest of the cast didn't know was that they were real at the time. They thought that they were fake, but around that period of time, it was cheaper to procure real skeletons rather than make fake ones. And many believed that angry spirits were attached to the skeletons and that they are the reason why the cast was cursed.
So they think the source of this of the whole curse
Are
is
these real
from this.
skeletons. But this was
Oh,
very popular in the 70s. Even when I studied archaeology and forensics in university, all of our skeletal collections were from the 70s, when universities would go and purchase skeletal remains from countries like India, where people were poor and hungry and were willing to sell off their dead to get some semblance of income. So everybody was just procuring real skeletons at a cheap rate in the 70s,
that is wild.
right? So the first cast member death was that of Dominique Dunn, who played Dana Freeling. I did cover Dominique in a video recently. Dominique passed away on November 4th, 1982, after her ex-boyfriend strangled her, sending Dominique into a coma for 6 days before her family had to make the difficult decision to take her off of life support. And obviously, if you want to know more about her and her death, you can go watch my video if you want. So she passed away only a few months after the movie premiered in theaters. Principal photography for the sequel, Poltergeist 2, The Other Side, began in May of 1985, and many of the original cast returned, including JoBeth Williams, Heather O'Rourke, and Craig T. Nelson. The real skeletons were also brought back for the sequel. And Craig had said that his co star, Will Sampson, who played the shaman Taylor, felt that there was a malevolent spirit on set. He went to the set late at night to perform an exorcism, and the next day, the cast said that they felt relieved. But maybe they should have held their breath for a little while longer. Julian Beck, who played Reverend Henry Kane, passed away on September 14th, 1985. While many attributed his death to the curse, he had been diagnosed with stomach cancer in 1983 and had taken the role while suffering from cancer, which honestly makes his appearance in the film much more haunting because he's very thin and frail looking. And he obviously passed away before he even got to see himself on screen. Poltergeist 2 premiered on May 23rd, 1986, and less than a year later, Will Sampson passed away. Will suffered from scleroderma, which is an autoimmune disease that affected his lungs, skin, and heart. He had passed away 43 days after a heart and lung transplant, which had gone successfully, yet he was suffering from malnutrition, a post-op infection, and kidney failure of an unknown cause, which put him into a coma for 10 days before ultimately passing away. Poltergeist 3 began filming in 1987 and premiered on June 10th, 1988. It centered around Carol Ann, the youngest Freeling, who was played by Heather O'Rourke. Heather and Zelda Rubinstein, who people say I remind them of, were two of the actors reprising their roles from the previous films. Heather became quite ill in 1987, where she contracted giardiasis. That's giardia, right? Yeah, that's
I think so.
from well water at her family home in Big Bear Lake, and was then diagnosed with Crohn's. Now, Amy, you had a dog named Lionel
Yes, he was a
that
rescue
we
from
loved,
Texas. Yep,
and he got giardia that I
he sure
referred
did.
to as his dark passenger.
Which I then took and have used ever since. But why did you call it that, Megan? You have to talk about your underlying fear.
Of parasites. I
Yeah.
do not like parasites. So contracting a dark passenger from well water is my literal nightmare.
Yeah. And it's the
Yeah,
one of the things, just warning to people who have dogs, if your dog does contract Giardia, it can pass to you as a human. It's like one of the few
yeah.
things that, you're not immune to when it comes to your animals. So be careful, wear gloves and
Don't
disinfect like
let them
crazy.
lick your face,
No.
please. During filming for Poltergeist 3, Heather had started undergoing treatment for Crohn's, which included getting cortisone injections. They made her face puffy, and she was incredibly self conscious about it. On January 31st, 1988, she started experiencing flu like symptoms, and the next morning she collapsed. She was rushed to the hospital, but went into cardiac arrest en route. Paramedics were able to restart her heart, and she was flown to Children's Hospital in San Diego, where doctors discovered that she had a blockage in her bowel. She was rushed into surgery, which she survived, only to go into cardiac arrest again. Doctors attempted CPR, but she passed away at 2:43 p.m. on February 1st, 1988. She was only 12 years old. She would never get to see herself in Poltergeist 3. 4 years later, on March 22nd, 1992, USA Air Flight 405 took off from LaGuardia in inclement weather. It was snowing, but not enough that pilots were concerned. As the pilots took off, passengers noted that it felt like the plane wasn't going fast enough. The first officer would later say it was like they lost lift. It had only been 5 seconds since they initiated takeoff of the plane before its left wing scraped across the asphalt. The plane was only several meters above the ground when it began randomly banking to the left and the right, back and forth, before crashing into numerous objects. The left wing detached from the body before the rest of the plane struck Flushing Bay, leaving part of the cockpit and the body of the plane submerged in water. Of the 51 people on board, 27 people died, including the captain and a member of the crew. Many of them drowned in this water. They couldn't undo their seatbelts. It was devastating. Richard Lawson was one of the lucky survivors, though. He played Ryan in the original Poltergeist movie. On April 1st, 2009, Seth Tatum had just attacked his mother's ex boyfriend with garden shears and in iron fire poker when he happened upon the house of Louis Perryman. Seth decided he would befriend Lou so that he could then steal his car. After speaking to Lou in his yard, Lou went back inside his house, not realizing that Seth had followed him into the home where he found Lou sitting at his computer. He struck Lou with an axe more than 10 times, mostly in the head. He then stole Lou's 1994 Geo. Lou was 67 years old. He played Pugsley in the original Poltergeist film. Now, in 2015, Fox and MGM decided to remake the original film. So far, the only reported tragedies were electrical issues on set and its abhorrent box office performance.
That's a good end.
Thank you.
I didn't see the remake, did you?
I did. It was terrible.
Oh God.
Yeah, it was not good. The original's the best. Sometimes we just need to leave these things alone.
Also, as you were going through them, when you got to the plane one, I'm like, this is giving Final Destination
Mm-hmm.
vibes. Like it is very,
It's spooky.
it's like a curse that just won't let go. You know what I mean? Like a lot of these things happening after the first film, like
Mm-hmm.
sort of attaching. Oh, it's so sad.
Speaking of Heather O'Rourke,
Speaking of Heather O'Rourke, I was reading about the movie Ghost with Demi Moore and the late great Patrick Swayze, and Whoopi Goldberg. And apparently that set was also had some haunting elements, and it was said that the ghost of Heather was running and laughing in the rafters because they used the same soundstage that she acted on, I guess, in the Poltergeist movies. And people, I don't know, there's probably some of the same crew, but they are probably the ones that like made the connection because she was a jovial kid and she would often run around set and laugh. And so there's like a little crossover there.
You hope that people cross over, but also it's kind of nice to think about this kid who really loved what she did.
Yeah.
Career and life were cut so short.
And
Being
she was,
able to stay in the place that brought her joy, like
yeah, and
that's
she was
kind
so
of
iconic looking. Like I still
hmm
remember those bangs and that blonde
yeah.
hair and like her cherubic face. And yeah, I mean, Poltergeist was such a staple in in my home growing up.
It's
So
interesting that you guys did not like The Exorcist, but Poltergeist was a
there's a quality that Steven Spielberg brings to anything he does, like because also Jaws is on my movie list, that it makes it sort of like family fare. I don't know how. There's something about his films, even when they're terrifying, that it just creates an opening for like younger people to go in and see it. I don't know why or how. It's the Poltergeist to me is less scary than The Exorcist.
yes, that is true.
I don't like I don't know. I don't know why, but it just is. Although I love Jo Beth Williams.
She's good.
Yeah.
She's good in that. So, because we talked about these spooky movies, we thought that we would also talk about our favorite Halloween movies and books.
Um, yeah, so I realized when trying to put together a list of my favorite sort of spooky horror movies that I am not as much an expert in this arena as Megan because I'm a scaredy cat, as we've established. I have seen some scary movies.
So, I thought because some of my favorite horror movies also had spooky things happen on set, so I thought I'd tell you a few anecdotes with my favorite horror films, if that's okay, Amy.
That's totally okay. Do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start.
Okay.
So one of my favorite, and they're all related to The Conjuring, which is one of my favorite horror movie franchises of all time.
Another
Um,
one I have never and will never
oh my
watch.
God, it's so good. So The Conjuring, obviously based on true events, featuring what's her face, one of my favorite,
Vera?
Vera. How do you say their last name?
I can't
Farmiga,
remember.
Farmiga. Um, because her and her sister both appear in The Conjuring.
And her sister appears in one of my movie picks.
She is one
Or
of your
no,
favorite ones. She
yeah, movie.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the movie, not a TV
Uh,
series.
Taisa. Very complicated names, this family. So, The Conjuring, both films, the cast and crew reported things like waking up every morning at 3 a.m., which we know is a spooky thing. It's like a demonic time. And that's
Hmm.
something that occurs in the movie. They reported feeling watched, with the most horrifying haunts happening to Vera and Joey King. Vera allegedly found claw marks carved across her personal laptop while she was filming and didn't know how they got there. And then those very same claw marks appeared on her thigh one day shortly after she wrapped on filming. And then
Ugh.
Joey King, who appears in the sequel, where they film predominantly in the family's like home, she developed a rare severe blood disorder while working on the film, seemingly out of the blue. It was so intense she had to go to the hospital before and after filming to get her blood drawn and tested, and in a high risk of internal bleeding. She explained it like all the red platelets from my body were drained, they were just gone. But after she finished shooting the movie and went home, it all stopped. She's never had an issue with her blood since.
Okay. That is
That's creepy, right?
creepy as shit. Yeah.
So then there's Annabelle and its sequel, which come from The Conjuring. And people endured weird injuries on those sets, like falling light fixtures. So there's the actor who played a demon who dies from a light fixture falling on him. It fell on him before filming. And then they also had nosebleeds that would stop after they left the house that they were filming in the sequel. And people reported seeing Annabelle moving on her own,
No,
the actual haunted doll. And then they just ended up blessing the set themselves because it got to be too much.
no, not interested.
And and I would say that Annabelle 2, I think, is one of the scariest movies in the entire franchise. I gave it 5 inhalers out of 5. And I saw it in the theater.
Really?
Breathe. It was terrifying.
Why?
It was just like the suspense, the doll. Like my cousins loved Chucky when I was growing up. They made me watch it when I was quite young, and I have had an intense fear of dolls being possessed. My cousin had a little buddy doll that kind of was in the same vein as Chucky.
Yes,
I
I
would make
remember
my
those.
aunt lock it in the closet. So my aunts, one of them passed away. His mom passed away, but they used to live in the same house. One aunt would always live upstairs, and the other aunt would always live downstairs, no matter where they lived. And I would always have sleepovers with my aunt who lived downstairs. So even though the doll was upstairs, I was like, lock it in the closet.
Oh, yeah. No, burn
I,
it.
I couldn't.
Like,
No,
get rid of it.
they could not handle this doll. And that's why I don't understand. Like Toy Story, I love it, but it's creepy. And then also Elf on the Shelf.
Like the
The, the, the,
premise of like
the
them,
Elf on the
yeah.
Shelf, where like you wake up and this doll has moved. I don't understand how any millennial parent could oblige their children by doing this. We grew up knowing that toys that moved were doing it to murder you, and you're doing
Yes,
it for
but I
fun.
think we've established that kids now have grown up with a lot more sane film references than we did.
Uh,
So
no,
they don't have that trauma.
no, that's well, they
It's
still have Chucky. It came out as a thing. He's less creepy though. I don't know. Um,
which the TV series, Devon
it has Devin
Sawa.
Sawa.
Mm-hmm.
I might have to watch it just for him. Then there's The Nun, which again came from the Conjuring universe,
Oh my God. There's a
which is
lot from The Conjuring, eh?
right. It's just so good. It's genius. The way that The Nun is like set up is genius. So the director Corin Hardy claimed he had his first supernatural experience ever while on set for The Nun. They were shooting a scene down a long 200-foot corridor that was filled with crosses. It's a very creepy scene. And he ducked into a pitch black like room, a cell, to watch the scene from the monitors. And he noticed that there was a room full of crew members behind him also watching the scene. But after they cut the scene, when he looked behind him to check in with them about it, there was no one there. And he would have seen
What?
them leave because the door, the only door, was in front of him.
Oh.
So that just, I was like, okay, these you feel it. These movies are so creepy, and I love them so much.
Oh God. Yeah, and unfortunately I will not watch any of the ones you've just
Oh my God,
talked
which is
about.
such a shame because they are like the writing of them is genius, and the placement of these characters is genius, and the build up and the tension. They are I watch them like over top of my glasses when I'm in the theater kind of a movie.
Yeah, and you are like so hardcore, you'll go to a theater to watch
Hmm.
these things where the screen is like so large and you can't escape.
I think some of my honorable mentions, though, for movies would be Sleepy Hollow, both the movie and the TV show.
Mm-hmm.
So good. Trick or Treat, which was filmed in Vancouver with
Yes, I know that
Sam, the
one.
creepy pumpkin head guy.
Yeah.
Ghost Ship, I think 90s kind of horror, like
Yeah.
Scream. I Know What
Yeah.
You Did Last Summer.
Those are
Final Destination.
yes, those are like the ones that I have as like because you have scary ones.
Hmm.
And because we all know that I'm a scaredy cat, I have like I feel mid-level like not so scary for people who are like me who need a little like you like the spook, you like the idea of these things, but ultimately you know that your sleep and sanity will be majorly compromised if you watch things. And I wanted to ask you, when you watch these movies, like the 5 inhalers out of
Hmm.
5, does it matter to you what time of day you watch them?
No.
See, I can only watch scary things like first thing in the morning.
I can watch them at night. If I um like had to sleep alone, I don't know if I could do it.
Yeah, no, no,
I don't
no,
know
no.
if I could do it. I usually have to watch something happy afterwards. I have
But
to watch
see,
like a show.
and even like you have cats, which are different than dogs, but I feel like would still sense a presence.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like anytime I watch something scary, my dogs act the fool. Like, they'll just be barking at like a random spot on the
Oh,
wall.
cats just, you've babysat my cats. They
Oh,
just
I know.
stare at
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. So that's like you feel safe because you're like, oh, if something happened, I have these dogs. But then they just actually increase the fear by
Mm-hmm.
doing weird
Weird. Yeah.
shit. Yeah. Yeah.
But that's when you need like your Halloween towns, your
Oh, I
practical magic,
love Halloween Town.
Beetlejuice,
Yeah.
Casper, Hocus
Casper's.
Pocus, the Addams Family. Like that's when these guys come in to play, to
Yeah,
cleanse your palate,
it's
to bring the
true.
Halloween magic.
Yep. Yep. Well,
What are some of
you
your favorites, Amy?
and you have like a larger group of books to recommend than I do. So I
Mm-hmm.
expanded mine a little bit more into movies and TV because I realize I
Mm-hmm.
watch more spooky TV
Do love a
series.
good spooky TV.
Yeah, that for me because I think the story and suspense is more drawn out over a longer arc
Mm-hmm.
narrative that I can invest and sort of prepare myself for in a bit differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not because I think movies like
The
true
pacing can be
scary,
quite
yeah,
intense. Yeah.
because you have a very short time frame and it's like got it's jam packed. So that's probably what freaks me out more than anything. But one movie I watched recently that I talked to you about, Abigail,
Mm-hmm.
about the little girl ballerina vampire and a crew of I guess hitmen that are sent there to sort of kidnap her and bribe her rich dad. And they end up being bait for her and they get locked into her house. It's fun. I mean, it's not groundbreaking or anything, but it is fun fare. And it had I forgot that Angus Cloud was in it, and that was really
Oh,
sad because I think it was his last film,
he
right?
was so talented.
I love him. I know. So that was really sad to watch. And I love Dan Stevens. I have to say, I know that people were pissed off that he left Downton Abbey and like he's had a sort of weird career post Downton Abbey, but I find he's incredibly interesting. His choices are always unexpected and he's really funny. Like he's a funny guy. And they initially pitched him as just this hunky Brit. Like, he played Beast and Beauty and the Beast. They really wanted him to be that, but he's, I think, rejected it and he's become this amazing character actor. So I really like him. So if you want something that's fun and not so scary, there is a lot of blood. That's one thing I will also say. I don't like gore in this horror genre
Not a big
world.
like body horror kind of person.
Body horror is cool,
Okay.
but gore, like Terrifier or like
Yeah,
Hostel,
I'm not a big,
can't
yeah.
do that shit.
No.
That I think is like disgusting.
Unnecessary kind of,
And
yeah.
like who's making that? And I'm not
Why?
I'm not trying to
Are you
judge,
okay?
but I'm real and like so like Leatherface
hmm
also terrifying to me. Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
It
like
always
any
reminds me of Idle Hands when he's got the saw and he's like,
Oh, look at me, I'm Leatherface.
yeah, yeah.
another good horror movie
Stuff
for
like that.
Halloween. Yeah.
No. So another recommendation for me, if you don't love being scared shitless, is like something like Jaws, which I do consider a horror. And I think
hmm
if you break it down, it does have the elements for a great horror movie.
Also an
Um,
amazing book.
yeah, and it's just such a perfect movie. Like it's perfect. Um, I would recommend that. And I know for anybody like on Megan's channel, they know that she recently did a video for me in honor of my birthday, and it was a Crush Goes to the Movies, and it was about Pennywise. And again, we talked about this last night about some comments being like, who in their sick mind would choose Pennywise as a crush? And I I guess you don't know my sense of humor, but I just thought it would be so funny to have Pennywise as a crush. And Megan, you can explain. It's Crush Goes to the Movies.
Yeah,
It's not,
people
yeah.
get confused about the fact that it's a different type of series. It's not like our Crushed, where we talk about actors. I mean, I even say it in the intro, but nobody listens to my intros. That it's not about the actors, it's about the TV shows and the movies. And originally it had started about certain characters in the shows, but that also people didn't understand, and it made me have a grudge against everybody who lives in Tacoma, Washington. So now it's just about like movies that we've loved or shows that we loved and talking about the background. And that's kind of like your request kind of helped bring it back to life in a
Yeah,
way.
which I love that
Yeah.
series. It's my favorite series.
And
But
people
I,
like somebody said that they loved like learning the background about characters and stuff. So we'll do it more. We will have to endure people's a
me
lack of
too.
understanding, but
And also, I think, for people like in the comments that were saying they can't do horror or they're like clowns scare them, it's a great sort of soft entry point in where you sort of dismantle the terror by explaining it, right? So people
mhm.
then can like look at it and watch your video and then choose, okay, maybe I can handle this a little bit now that I know the backstory. So I think they're actually incredibly helpful
Also
for
for people that
context.
don't do well with horror, like there were some people that said that it was nice because they were never able to watch it before, but the video
Exactly.
gave them what it, so it was like they were able to watch it without having to watch it, which is that's a
That's
compliment. That's what
That's
I
what
try
I'm
to do.
saying. You're so good at it. You're so good
Thanks.
at it. So I do recommend it. Um,
I love it.
I think the kids that they cast in the part one are
Oh,
fantastic.
they're so good.
They're so
So
funny. They're
talented. Yeah.
so fantastic. And part two, I mean, the cast is insane. It's Bill
Oh,
Hader,
Bill
it's James
Hader. Yeah. When
McAvoy,
Bill
Jessica
Hader does his
Chastain.
impression of Pennywise and he's like, "Well,"
I know
it's funny.
exactly.
It's a perfect blend of humor and horror.
Yeah, I really liked it. And I know people are really protective of the original series, and that's fantastic too. And people
Mhm.
were asking me which one I preferred, and I was saying I like both of them, obviously.
They offer different things.
They just offer different things. And because my husband and I are kind of in the industry, my husband would never watch it because it scared, like, Pennywise is his Reagan. He just cannot handle it. Um, but we recognize people in the series. Like we're like, oh, that's so and so. So it just takes us out. Whereas the film doesn't really. Also, I will say about the film, part of it was filmed in Port Stanley, in Ontario. And I went to Port Stanley one summer for a week and stayed with a friend uh, for like just it was a writing thing. And I love that little town. Like it was this sleepy little beach town. Megan, I feel like you and I should go and rent a cottage or something because it is so beautiful and it has those like vibes, those dairy vibes. I mean, minus the psycho
Mhm.
clowns, but I watching it, I was like, oh my God, Port Stanley. Anyway, and then Megan referenced like I know what you did last summer. That's where I had a crush on Ryan Phillippe. It was
Mhm.
my introduction to him. I don't have that crush anymore. Scream, the original Scream. I mean, I think we both
Iconic.
have a
Mhm.
crush on Matthew Lillard.
Oh yeah.
Um, Again, villain though in that, so I don't know what's wrong with me. And then another one. Do you remember House of Wax with Alicia
I
Cuthbert?
do. Does that have Jared Padalecki in it? Is that
I think so. I think so. But to me,
and
do you
Paris
remember
Hilton?
the great scene where she sticks her finger up and he chops it
Mm-hmm.
with like that is the most disgusting, terrifying scene. Anyway, that was a good one. Insidious, that like the Insidious
Oh, and
movies,
the
I can't
yeah.
watch them.
Oh, what's the older lady in it? She's so good and she's such a good actress and she plays creepy so well. What's her
Oh,
name?
I
Oh,
can't
Lynn
remember.
Shay. She plays Elise Rainier.
Oh, I don't remember. I only
She's
partly
like the
watched
older
the
lady
first
who
one.
like takes them in through the worlds and stuff. But I also love
Ooh,
Rose Byrne.
and isn't it Ethan Hawke?
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Oh,
it
yeah, it's Ethan Hawke's in one of the Patrick Wilson's in some of them too.
yeah, I only saw the first one and like only watched it like while I was at work with my back to the projection screen because we had it playing just as a fun Halloween thing when I used to work 9 to 5. And it like I couldn't, it was so scary to me. I couldn't even like watch it with my back to it. Like watching it, like I couldn't handle it.
If Ethan Hawke was in it, then it wasn't Insidious.
What? Who
Sinister.
was in the
You
first
watch
one?
Sinister. What's
Oh
Patrick
no,
Wilson?
Sinister.
Sinister. But Insidious isn't a phenomenal.
Which one is Insidious?
Insidious is the one where the guy he let me try. I can never remember anything. I say I know I remember things, but I don't. Uh Insidious is their son, so it's Patrick Wilson and Rose Byrne's son goes into this like a comatose state and he becomes a vessel for ghosts in an astral plane. And they're continuously haunted by demons from this forbidden realm known as the Further until they take from the family what they want most, life. And Lynn Shay plays this, like, I guess she's kind of like a medium and she like takes them into the Further, and it has to do with Patrick Wilson's, like it's nuts, but it's a very good spooky series. But yeah, you're talking about Sinister.
Okay, Sinister is the one that I hate.
Mhm.
Insidious I've never seen.
Sinister
Okay.
is also creepy
It's
as
creepy as shit.
all. Yeah.
Okay, the other one again that I think is scary because of the premise, and again, it deals with people and like where people are at and the violence that lives in like all of us is The Purge. The premise of
Mhm.
The Purge is really freaky to me. Um, the film that I love, and I know it's not reviewed that well, but Megan and I watched it together for the first time, is The Final Girls. And this
Mhm.
is a comedy slasher
I
film.
love it.
It's like a funny spoof of 80s summer camp slasher films. And I highly suggest it. It's just fun. Like it's not scary and it really kind of deconstructs the stereotypes and the tropes of the characters in these types of films. So it's I think it's great. The other one films that I love and I realize are not well reviewed are the Fear Street trilogy films
I
that are
love
on
those ones
Netflix.
too. Yeah.
I don't care. I love
They were
them. And
good.
they're based on the R.L. Stein books and they're separated into parts. So there's part one, 1994, part two, 1978, and part three, 1666. And what's cool about it is it's kind of an American Horror Story in the sense that the cast that you experienced in the first film are in all of the films playing different characters. And I like that threading. Um, and it just brought back old fun vibes. And it is, I find it scary. I don't care.
Hmm.
And a fun fact that these films are directed by Lee Janiak, and she is married to Ross Duffer of the Stranger Things Duffer Brothers. So it
Mm.
did give me kind of Stranger Things vibes as well. And Stranger Things also great. So quickly, two TV series that I love, and if I can do them, you can do them. Mike Flanagan's The Haunting of Hill House, to me,
Hmm.
is one of the most extraordinary horror TV shows of all time. And that is because to me, I would classify it first as a family drama, then as horror.
Hmm.
And the payoffs in this show are so smart, so beautiful. This show devastated me. I don't think I've ever cried so like with so much like don't I cried so hard at the end of it. When the payoff with anyway, his other series Midnight Mass is also extraordinary. And the last show I will recommend is called From, and you can watch this on Paramount Plus, and the third season is on the way. I'm biased. I love it. My dear friend is in it. She plays Donna, but before I even knew she was in it, I loved it. And yeah, I think Megan is also enjoying it
Hmm.
currently.
Because I also got to meet another cast member because of you, and she's
Yeah.
lovely. And it's an amazing series. Very intense, very weird, but
Yeah.
so good.
it like takes place somewhere in middle America, even though it shoots in Canada, I think somewhere in like Nova Scotia or
Hmm.
something. And it's in a small town that traps people and subjects them to terrifying creatures that come out at night from the surrounding forest, and they can't leave the town, and nobody knows why they arrive there because it's not on any map. It's like, anyway, it's really cool. It's from the creators of Lost, so if you
Hmm.
like that
It's
type
got
of
that vibe.
thing,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, that's it. That's all I'm recommending, which is quite a bit.
Okay. Well, now we have to get into books. I'm gonna rip through it because I have to go to the mall.
Oh yeah.
So my top ones, I'm gonna go from like more jovial spooky to spooky spooky, would be Undead Girl Gang, which is about Riley and her friend Mila who live in a small town. But they don't have anything to do, so they dabble in witchcraft, and then Mila dies, and so uh Riley tries to bring her back to life, which is never a good decision. And that's written by Lily Anderson. Then there's The Babysitter's Coven, which I think I bought you
Yep.
one from. That's
Mm-hmm.
by Kate Williams, and it's about Esme who likes babysitting rather than like working a regular job, but she can't figure out why this girl named Cassandra Heaven wants to babysit with her, and maybe it's because they come from a long line of babysitters who actually are there to fight evil. Love it. Then there's another series called Hex by Michelle Chris, which is about a girl named Indigo Blackwood, and she's a super cool cheerleader, but her mom owns an occult shop. And everything's going fine until their family Bible that her mom's super protective of goes missing. And then this ridiculously good looking boy named Bishop enters her life, and he's like, hey, you have to get the Bible back because all these witches are going to die if you don't. And that sucks for you because, by the way, you're a witch. And there's technically two books in the series. There's Hexed, and then there's Charmed, and then there's like a novella called Blackwood. It's really good. Like I reread it every Halloween, and I don't reread anything because I have too many books. Now, for super spooky books, Come Closer by Sarah Gran is about Amanda, and she's a successful married architect. And everything's going great until she starts hearing weird noises in her apartment. And then she starts exhibiting strange behaviors that she has no recollection of. And there's a voice in her head that's been egging her on. Like, is she losing her mind or is she maybe possessed? I could not sleep after I finished this book.
Oh
That is how
God.
spooky it is. Then
Oh.
there's The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling, and I'm a huge Caitlin Starling fan. She wrote The Luminous Dead, which is one of my favorite deep space cave horror novels. I've talked about it before. And The Death of Jane Lawrence is set in post-war England, and Jane's very pragmatic. She decides that she would like a marriage of convenience that will allow her to continue doing her work. And she sets her sights on this doctor named Augustin Lawrence, and he's all in to her deal, but he's like, one caveat, you can't go to my home, Lindridge Hall. So obviously she ends up at Lindridge Hall, and terrible things happen. And we realize why he doesn't want her going there. Very spooky, very cool. I like that time period. Then there's another one of my favorite horror authors, Darcy Coates, and she wrote a novel called From Below. You know, I love a deep water horror, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
And this one is about a diver named Cove, and her and her team go on a dive looking for the SS Arcadia, which disappeared without a trace 60 years before, but they found it. So they go dive it. And as they make their way to the watery grave, they discover that the Arcadia is dying for more guests. Do you see what I did there? And then another one that I never hear anybody talk about, and it's by Canadian author Alexandra Grigorescu. It's called Cauchemar. Cauchemar. This might be a French word. And it's about a 20-year-old girl named Hannah who lives at the edge of the Louisiana swamp. She's just minding her own business when her estranged birth mother arrives, who happens to be an outcast witch. And there are ghosts, as there should be, I feel, in any book written about a Louisiana swamp. And it's a phenomenal book. And I think about it all the time, even though I read it in 2015.
Wow.
And it's just, I love books that are set in like Louisiana and like that kind of area. There's just
Mm-hmm.
something, the culture there just has such a richness to it and like a spookiness. And I love it. And those are my spooky book recommendations, apart
Did
from
you have
ones.
my best friend's exorcism?
I
I
do
thought it
have that
was
on my list.
that's one book I read because of you.
Hmm.
Um,
Grady Hendrix
I
does decent horror. Some of them are better than others, but
Yeah, and the covers of the book are just cool. This
I
one
like
was cool.
the Southern Book. Was it the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires was also a good one, set in Georgia, I believe.
Yeah. I am just going to, I mean, again, my experiences with horror writing are, I wouldn't say limited to, but Stephen King. I mean, he's just so he's iconic for a reason. I will suggest you read Pick Up Salem's Lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because it is being has been adapted into a new movie on HBO that's coming out in October, and it stars Lewis Pullman, Bill Pullman's son,
Mm-hmm.
and it looks dope. I made you watch the trailer and it looks really, really great. And Salem's Lot, I believe, is Stephen King's favorite book that he's written, vampires, and you should check it out. And
And
yeah,
it comes from the guy who wrote it, also wrote Annabelle Comes Home, which 5 inhalers out of 5. It, Nun, The Nun too, like all of these absolutely terrifying films. So I hope everybody enjoyed this first episode introduction into October with us. We look forward to doing more spooky October episodes. We've got some themed ones coming up. So we'll see you next week. Until then, stay safe
check your candy.
and may the cult
Be with you.